In this video, I interview Josh leTissier, a producer and DJ from Guernsey with over 55 million streams and regular gigs at clubs such as the Ministry of Sound. His music's been supported by the likes of Hardwell and Timmy Trumpet and been heard in festivals around the world such as Tomorrowland. Not only that, but he's remixed colossal artists such as Carly Rae Jepsen, Griffin and Lewis Capaldi, and he's somewhat of an expert at growing a huge Spotify following as a completely independent producer. So today we're going to talk about Spotify tactics, what works and what doesn't work, and what to definitely avoid. We're also going to talk about how to use social media to grow your listeners in the most efficient way, as well as tips on mixing and mastering, mental health as a producer, and how to land gigs at world-class clubs even if you live in the middle of nowhere like Guernsey. No offense, Guernsey, I can say that though because I'm from the Isle of Wight. So without further ado, let's meet Josh. Josh, welcome to edmtips.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, absolute pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you for taking the time. I know we've got lots to go through today, both in terms of music production and Spotify. So we may as well kick things off straight away. Why don't you just, for anyone who hasn't listened to your music yet, why don't you just give a brief background about what kind of music you make and maybe a couple of the highlights you've had so far with your music?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Josh leTissier, DJ and producer. I've been DJing and producing for about 12 years or so now, just gone super fast. I've DJed at places like Ministry of Sound in London, which is quite an iconic one. I think right now I have over 55 million streams across like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. And in terms of style, I've been doing a lot of like big room, progressive house, the kind of festival stuff. But I'm not limited to that. So I have made things like hard style, deep house. I'm even doing like a drum bass edit of one of my songs right now, which is interesting because I never made it before. So yeah, I just like to do different things to keep it interesting, really.
Nice. And that's interesting that you've just mentioned Spotify, because we will be going into that in a lot more depth in a few minutes, but that's a lot of streams. So congratulations on that. You've had a couple of particular hits that I saw bubbling around, which is why I reached out to you initially. There was the remix or the remake of the Faithless track, and then you did a remake of a Lewis Capaldi track as well. So why don't you just give a little bit of info about those two tracks? And we can link to them below this video as well.
Yeah, sure. So actually both of those were in 2019, which is when things started taking off and I started getting a lot more streams and a lot more attention, I guess. So yeah, the Insomnia Faithless cover got played at Tomorrowland. I remember when I got like the notification on 1001 track lists, and I had to like quadruple check because I just literally couldn't believe it. And then from there it just got millions of streams on Spotify, and yeah, it still gets played a lot today, which is really cool.
It's a banger.
Thanks. Yeah, I still play it in my sets as well, even though it's like 4.5 years old now. So
nice.
And the Lewis Capaldi one, so I made a bootleg back in 2019 when it was #1 all over the UK, in fact all over the world I think, and it got picked up by Sirius XM in the US, and they started playing it on the radio. And obviously because I'm from Guernsey, we don't have Sirius XM, so I had no idea this was going on. It was going on for weeks, and then the radio presenter sent me an Instagram direct message, and at first I thought this can't be real. But she basically said, "Oh, we've been playing this bootleg of yours, and every time we play it, loads of people are asking, like, where can they download it? Where can they listen to it?" And then from there, we basically tried to make it an official remix. Unfortunately, Universal didn't go for it, but I did get another like remix for Universal from that. So that was a nice little thing, even if it wasn't the Lewis Capaldi one.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant, man. So even though it was just an unofficial bootleg, and ultimately it couldn't be monetized and officially released, the buzz from that has obviously led to opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. So one particular thing, one of the promoters at Ministry of Sound happened to recognize me around that time back in 2019 and reached out. And then, yeah, I've been doing a couple of gigs a year ever since then. Obviously not COVID because we couldn't, but
yeah.
So yeah, the kind of the numbers and the radio play, it adds credibility, and then I think you get taken more seriously and opportunities and doors start to open. So,
and I think Spotify has been a big part of your kind of climb to success as well, and you seem to have really nailed down what works and what doesn't. And that's one of the things that I know that my audience would be really interested in finding out. But the fact that you are, much like myself, from an English island that's kind of far away from, you know, the center of the music industry. I know from my experience, you know, the trials and tribulations that brought. So why don't you give a little bit of, maybe some of the pros and cons of living slightly out in the sticks? Because I know a lot of my viewers are from all over the world,
Right.
Backwaters from all over the world and cities from all over the world. So it's going to be important, I think, to hear that from someone who's actually, really successful.
Yeah. So pros and cons of, just for the record, Guernsey is a very small island between England and France. I think the population right now is 67,000. So really small. You can drive around it within like 45 minutes and the speed limit's like 35. So that gives you an idea how small it is. There isn't much of a music scene. There's 2 nightclubs, one of which I DJ at a couple of times a month, but it's a lot of like commercial remixes that I'm playing. There's no kind of like big room EDM scene. Anything that I do play has to be like kind of recognizable because it's not big enough to have like these niche genres.
Yeah.
Actually, the only thing that works is drum and bass. That's the thing that really sells tickets in Guernsey that isn't like mainstream, I guess.
Same on the Isle of Wight, actually, funnily enough.
Drum and bass? Or...
Yeah.
I think it's like a UK thing, and I guess...
Although New Zealand, they love their drum and bass as well.
Interesting.
But again, it's an island, so... I don't know, maybe
it's just an island thing.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
I guess the advantage of living in Guernsey and having to play these like commercial remixes is I'm constantly thinking, would this work in Guernsey in terms of like, are people going to recognize the vocals, or is the melody like well known enough that people would instantly recognize it and enjoy it? So I think that's what led me down to the road of doing a lot of like covers, bootlegs, because I wanted to play stuff in my sets and I knew I couldn't make like original like big room and EDM tracks because I would never be able to play them in my like local gigs. So as a DJ, you want to play the stuff you're producing, and because there's no feeling like that. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. You kind of turned that almost could be perceived as a limitation into something of a strength because it's forced you to kind of think of your audience, but whilst also satisfying your own creative urge and not, selling out and making something that you've no interest in making just because it's going to be popular. You've kind of married those two interests into a sweet spot. Yeah.
It's funny because I don't think I'd thought about it that way until we just had this conversation. I guess it's just a subconscious thing. So
yeah. No, that's cool. As you've already mentioned, you've got a lot of Spotify streams, and I know that's something that you've focused on a lot for the past few years as well. So how important has Spotify been in growing your profile as a producer in other opportunities? And then perhaps we can touch on some of the things that work and the things that don't.
Yeah, sure. So Spotify was like the primary focus, and to be honest, it probably still is among like Apple Music and YouTube, but it's been my primary focus probably since like 2018, 2017, that kind of time. And I'm mostly doing like self-releases. So I've got a few tracks on record labels. Part of the strategy with Spotify, at least my strategy, is having like regular, consistent releases. And when you're dealing with record labels, because of like wait time before signing and actually releasing, it's like, I think the biggest one I had was like 8 months or something. You can imagine how difficult it is to try and get like a track a month or a certain amount of tracks a year when you're just constantly waiting on a record label to sign it. And in this day and age, there's so many services out there that you can use, and they get them up there like really quickly and at like a pretty good price. So it's lots of opportunities in this day and age.
So, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I recommend to newer producers is to try and release on a label, because coming from no following whatsoever, you're kind of hacking into a pre-existing network. They'll share it with their listeners, then it gets you more exposure, and many opportunities can come from that. But you've built this massive following, off your own back and these regular releases. So
I do agree with you with the whole record label thing and how tapping into their audience. But the one thing I would say is it has to be the right record labels. I'm not going to name names, but there's been some good ones I've worked with and some bad ones. And I struggle to see the value that some of them brought.
Yeah.
Because obviously they take a huge cut. You tap into their fan base, but sometimes you don't get as many followers or listeners as you'd expect. And considering they're taking a huge cut, it doesn't seem quite right to me. But obviously, there are some labels out there that are fantastic and they have this really loyal fan base. And if you release on that label, then you've got like a dedicated fan for years. So that is good. So I do agree with that. But I think it's more powerful if you can try and build it by yourself, because then you're not relying on the record label's fan base. And actually, I saw some producer friends who was like signing with record labels And then they decided to do some self-releases. And then they had that sudden realization of, okay, it was the label, like fan base, that was listening to these tracks. They weren't like listening to me. And then the
Right.
streams like weren't there, the listeners weren't there, and then they started to realize that two very different things. So
Interesting. Yeah, I can see how that could be the case. So not all labels are created equal, and not all labels are suitable for every artist. Excellent. So I know that we are going to go into some of the actionable tactics that you've used to build a following with Spotify, but rewinding a little bit, I guess from my perspective, the first thing to do is to get your music sounding great. Would you say that's a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. I would say it's so much easier to promote a really good sounding track. Music is subjective, but a good mix and master will obviously like translate better better in terms of promotion. And it's just, yeah, I'm lost for words, but I think you know exactly what I mean. Like it has to sound good because then everything else becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. So from my perspective, people say art is subjective. I think you can take that to the extremes though. And yes, music is subjective, but there is also objectively badly produced music. So you might have something that's well produced, but it's just not your cup of tea. Or you might have something that's just badly produced. And you can actually say, technically, this is badly produced for these reasons. So I think art is subjective, but there's a limit to that subjectivity, and there is an element of objectivity.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, the subjective side is more on the composition and say the sound design. Mixing and mastering is more the technical side, and yeah, it's not an art form. Maybe I'll get slated for saying that, but I don't think it is really.
It's more of the science part. I mean, music production is that combination of art and science. Who would you say who are your biggest influences? Because you're making this driving big room trance. What music really kind of inspired you when you were growing up, maybe before you even started producing?
When I was like a teenager, I wasn't the kind of teenager that was super into music. I only started really getting into it when I was 17 and I had my first car and I put in a subwoofer because I thought it was cool. Yeah. I still have it now. I'm still on my first car with the sub and I still crank it. And I was basically looking for music that had loads of bass because I just wanted it, to push the sub to the limits.
Yes.
And then that's kind of when I found the whole like electro house, dirty Dutch house, like back in the early Afrojack days.
Yeah.
I think the song that really got me into that was Riverside by Sidney Sampson, which I think was back in 2010 or something. Yeah, still a banger. Still love it.
Yeah.
But when I was a teenager, I think the only music that I properly listened to was like Clubland Classics. Those like, classic CDs with, I guess, the top 40 club tracks each year or something. Yeah. So I think that's also part of the influence for doing these covers of classic songs. But right now, who I'm most influenced by is people like W&W. I still follow Hardwell a lot, but I'm not really doing much like of his style because he's obviously moved into the more techno darker side. But I'm still kind of inspired by what he's doing and his energy, I think.
Okay, cool. And in terms of your workflow, because I know this is something that a lot of producers struggle with, myself included, sometimes you just hit a writer's block or you get stuck in a loop. Are there any particular tools like mental hacks or physical like plugins and tools that you have to help when you get stuck?
That's a really good question. I think that the thing that I'm doing right now is I'm not starting from scratch. I never start with a blank canvas anymore because I have so many tracks that I'm very happy with the way that they sound. And in terms of like mixing and mastering and the actual sound design, I'm most of the time now picking a project that's already finished, making a new copy of it in Ableton, like shifting it to the right, starting from there. So I've already got like a really nice sounding kick and bass as a way of starting something. I already had like synths that sound really clean and powerful. Obviously I can change them afterwards, but I can kind of get like a rough arrangement and something sounding good like really quickly. And then I can change things afterwards. And that has sped things up like super, super quick.
I love that. That's great.
I haven't started from like a blank canvas in years. Like literally 3 or 4 years, I think.
I guess that's where having a specific focus or a sound becomes like allows you to snowball. I imagine then, having that focus of sound has allowed your both productivity and a brand to snowball and grow as you move down this, one path of genre almost.
Yeah, I think, in fact, if you start listening to the same artist, or your favorite artist, you'll probably notice that they're also using certain elements again and again and again in the same tracks. So, in different tracks. The reason for doing it is obviously to save time and so I can produce more, because I still have a day job. My time is quite limited. I'm just working on music in the evenings and on either Saturday or Sunday. So that's a big benefit of that. But yeah, like, as you say, you almost like have like a brand, because you could recognize that I'm using very similar sounds in different tracks.
Yeah, that is like a signature sound. That is when people can recognize your productions from hearing that cohesion. So
I personally, I don't think I have a signature sound though. Yeah, I think don't know if that's like imposter syndrome, or if it's if I'm being too harsh on myself, but like, I don't know, there's nothing specific that I could say, this is a Josh leTissier track because I'm doing this, if you know. I think it's a combination of many different things. Maybe that's signature as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have the insight that imposter syndrome, still hits for someone that's had, did you say 55 million streams on Spotify?
Yeah,
because you're clearly not an imposter. That's real results in the real world, and you're DJing at the Ministry of Sound a couple of times a year. And I think a lot of people would be interested to see that, because I get it too, and I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've been doing EDM tips for 8 years, and I still feel imposter syndrome. And I hope it's going to be helpful for people to see that that's okay and that's normal.
Yeah, I'm sure because I listen to a lot of music industry podcasts and podcasts in general, and I think there's a lot of, by the way, I'm not saying I'm big, but there's a lot of big people out there who have imposter syndrome, and you're just saying like how or why, because they're extremely successful and they totally deserve it because they worked for it. So yeah, it is weird.
Yeah, the human condition.
Yeah.
So touching upon those streams, which have obviously opened up a lot of opportunities, because you mentioned that, well, actually, you mentioned the promoter at Ministry hearing about you through the remixes or the covers that you did that did well. But how has Spotify and your growth on there kind of factored into opportunities as well?
Trying to think of things specifically. I mean, you get a lot more like collaboration requests from people who obviously think, I'm going to like tap into his Spotify audience. That helps a lot as well, I would say. Of course, not all the collaborations end up happening for one reason or another. Like, we can't come up with something that we both enjoy, or you know how it is, sometimes it just doesn't work out. But other than collaborations, I think people probably take you a little bit more seriously. So like, we were both at the Amsterdam Dance event a couple of months ago, and I think when you introduce yourself and you mention that you've had a certain number of streams or that you've done certain things, people's opinions change and they kind of take you more seriously, rather than it's just some random producer guy at this event.
Yeah, so you've got real world proof of your competence and the fact you've been doing it for a while. From my experience, I can say that definitely opens up more opportunities. I imagine that you would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So down to the brass tacks of it, really. I mean, maybe you could share some of your insights about what you found has really helped, and maybe some of the dead ends you've gone down with Spotify growth.
Plenty of those.
yeah. If that's okay, if you'd like to share, I'm sure that people would find it very interesting.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and limit it, because I could talk for a very, very long time on this. Spent a long, long time researching and testing what works and what doesn't. But so there's a few things to avoid. Is playlist promotion. And that's, I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of or been contacted by these people that would like to sell you a spot on their playlist for X amount of money, and you stay on that playlist for say like a month, and they sort of guarantee that you're going to get X amount of streams. I've tried it. It works to some degree in terms of you get some streams, but then as soon as you get taken off that playlist, the streams just go back to nothing, because people weren't listening to your song, they were listening to the playlist, like when they were at the gym or driving to work or whatever it might be. So they're just kind of passively listening. So that doesn't really convert into fans and like long-term repeat listeners. Of course, there's a small percentage of people that would like check you out, but statistically it's not that great. Plus, what I noticed as well, there's a lot of playlists using like fake streams or fake bots to build up the numbers, which is really risky, because you could get your music taken down because it's against like Spotify's policies. So yeah, playlists kind of a no-go. Basically, it's just not great quality. Saying that, there is one service that I do use, and that's Submit Hub, where basically you like buy credits and then submit your track to certain Spotify playlist curators, and they like listen to your track, and if they like it, they'll add it to the playlist for a certain amount of time. That works, and that I trust in that in some respects because I'm a curator on there myself, and I know that the process to become a curator on there is quite rigorous, and they really check that you're not using bots or fake streams or anything like that. So I'm very confident that if you get on a playlist there, that it's genuine, it's real listeners. Again, they're likely to be passive listeners where they have it on in the background or at the gym or whatever it might be, but at least it's real. So that's why I use it. Yeah, it's a good service. So that's one of my top recommendations.
I think I actually interviewed the founder of Submit Hub 6 or 7 years ago. I think there's an interview.
It's grown a lot since then because I've been a curator for about 3 years, and I've seen like the number of submissions like keep going up like year on year, and I think they created a really great tool there. And
it's something we recommend to our accelerator students for sure.
Oh, nice.
Once we've gone through the production, Submit Hub is definitely one of the tools that we find works as well. So it's nice to hear that corroborated.
What else do I recommend? I recommend creating your own playlist and basically trading placement with other curators. If you can build up a following on your own playlist, you have some like value to bring to other playlist curators, and you can trade. And again, that's good because, well, it doesn't cost you anything. I guess it depends how big your playlist follower is, how many followers you have on your playlist, and what doors it opens, like in terms of other curators.
So by starting your own playlist, do you mean your own Spotify playlist that might be called something like Hard Trance Bangers, and then you spend the time curating tracks that you like, and then you have followers on your playlist that trust your taste and that they will go back to that playlist because they know you pick tunes they like?
Exactly that. Actually, funny you say that. I actually have a playlist called like Rave Anthems and Big Room Bangers.
It's a good name.
And yeah, it's basically tracks that I like, some of my own tracks, one's from Submit Hub, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
we'll link to that below this video as well for anyone who wants to check out that playlist.
There's some bangers on there.
Good, it delivers what it says.
Yeah. And then the main thing I would say is like Facebook ads and Instagram ads. So again, the people listening probably seen them where you're scrolling through Instagram and you see like a listen now, and it takes you to like a landing page where then you can go and listen on like Spotify or Apple Music. Those are great because you're getting very active listeners that are making like a very conscious decision to go ahead and stream the track that they've just heard a preview to, which is amazing for the algorithm. Like the algorithm absolutely loves that kind of active, conscious decision to go and stream and save the song or listen to it multiple times. Well, at least that's my experience of trying to work out how the algorithm works. Yeah, repeat listeners, saves, playlist ads, that kind of thing is like, yeah, super important.
And did you find that you had to reach a certain tipping point of listeners for the ads to become effective, or was it more your music just reached a certain quality where you knew that the ads were targeted at the right people? And
to be honest, I still struggle with this now, with like promoting one song over another. A song that you think is an absolute hit and everybody's going to want to stream the song, and you put the ad out and then the cost per conversion is super high and then it's not as well received. But then you might have another track where you think, I like the track, not 100% convinced that it's going to work, but I'm obviously going to promote it because it's a release, and then it just takes off, and then the cost per conversion is really low. It triggers the algorithm, but yeah, the algorithm's really unpredictable. So I've had it a few times where I've had some fantastic numbers in terms of the ads, lots of saves, lots of repeat listeners, and then Discover Weekly and Release Radar don't really do very much, and it's weird. I think it's like just an ongoing learning curve as to what's working and what doesn't. And if there's a certain sound that's trending, then I guess that's going to be better for cost per conversion and triggering the algorithm as well. So, and
do you actively search for trends and sometimes think, how can I tap into that? Or is it just luck of the draw?
To be honest, I think the music that I make, I think I'm a little bit stuck in the past because I didn't follow the whole big room techno trend that's been happening for the last couple of years. I've just kind of stuck to what I really enjoy making and playing. I think there's enough people in the world that really enjoy that. So I think you can make a career out of everything because there's always a big enough group of people that enjoy certain things.
Yeah.
But talking of trends, my latest release is actually a cover of Last Christmas.
Oh, really?
Because I wanted to kind of, well, people have been asking me for years, or telling me rather, like, oh, you should do a Christmas remix. I think it'd be great. And there can't be that many of them. And it turns out there's quite a lot, actually, when I was doing some research. But yeah, I thought I'd give it a go. It was actually a lot of fun. So I guess you could say I kind of followed a trend there where obviously it's Christmas and I made a Christmas cover.
And is that remix out yet, or that cover out yet?
Yes, it's been out for like 3 weeks or so now.
Okay, well, we'll link to that as well. I'm not sure when this video is going out yet. It might be after Christmas, but let's just pretend it's not. We'll still link to the track.
Sure.
So it can trend next year as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the hope that it might be a song that, is obviously it's seasonal, but hopefully the streams pick up every December. But
yeah,
we'll see.
Great. And are there any other future projects or collaborations that you're excited about? Any tracks you've got coming up?
Yeah, so many tracks. I think I've got 5 or 6 lined up for next year. A few originals, some covers again. Funny thing is, I do want to start focusing more on original music and stop doing the covers. But the covers are great for exposure because people are constantly searching for like a newer version of a certain song or a song in a different style.
Yeah.
And they're easier to promote as well because it's familiar, it's recognizable. I've been saying it for ages that I don't want to do covers anymore, but they're a lot of fun to make as well. That's the thing.
If they're fun and they work, what's your reason for wanting to do fewer of them?
I think it's probably like an ego thing where you just want to focus on original music. So you can say, oh, this is, completely original. This is mine. Yeah. I made it from scratch. I'm not covering certain melodies or vocals. Yeah, I think it's purely an ego thing. I mean, you're even seeing huge guys right now doing covers. Actually, just today, I was listening to a recent Tiesto track and he covered a Tears for Fears song. Well, actually, I think it was Tears for Fears, like an official Tears for Fears Tiesto like collaboration, but it was just like a newer version of Everybody Wants to Rule the World or something. So,
oh, really?
So I think if like Tiesto and people like that are doing it, then I suppose there's no real shame.
Yeah. I mean, from a personal perspective, I think your tunes smash it out the park, the covers and the originals. So I think you should be proud. Yeah, I'll link to the tracks we've spoken about on your playlist. So then when the new ones are released, obviously people will be updated about those as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. So I guess, I mean, there are a lot of tips that I know that people could have taken from this conversation already, but is there anything specific that you would suggest to someone who's perhaps just starting out? Anything that you found, really helped when you were just starting out? That's a really bad way of questioning. I was basically trying to say, are there any tips you give to starting producers?
Yeah, I think if I could go back in time, for when I was starting to make music 11 or 12 years ago, whenever it was, I think I had too much pride and I wasn't willing to ask for help. I would just go onto YouTube, search how to do things. Yeah, whereas I think if you had like a one-to-one coach or something earlier, then because I have done production lessons obviously over the years, but what I mean is I wish I'd started that sooner, but the ego and the pride holding me back from reaching out and asking for help, I think.
Okay. I mean, that's a big one. That's something that I personally found useful when I finally just sought mentorship. It really helps. And in terms of any technical tips that were really like aha moments that maybe, when you learn one particular skill and it's just like, okay, my music now sounds better forever because of this one thing I've learned. Are there any of these plateau smashers that you can?
Yeah, I've got a few. So I use the SonarWorks reference system-wide. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I have it on this very system. Yeah.
It's a total game changer. I think it's fantastic. It's worth every penny. So for the listeners who don't know what it is, it's basically some software that calibrates your speakers or headphones. So it's like basically a flat frequency response, which means you can make much better mixing and mastering decisions. It doesn't rely on your room being completely treated or like perfect. So I think that was one of the biggest things, which again, I was putting it off for a few years because I knew about it for a long time, and it was only back in 2020 when I just finally thought, I'll just give it a go, because I don't think it's cheap. I can't remember the price, but it did put me off. And then as soon as I bought it, I was like, why didn't I get this years ago? And the other thing is, you probably won't be able to see it in the video, but I have a sub pack. So I have a sub pack in my chair, because I don't have a subwoofer in the studio. Even then, I think it's probably inaccurate because of the room. So with the sub pack, you can actually feel frequencies below 100 hertz, I think. And then when you're referencing other tracks, when you're mixing, you can just feel the bass on your back and just know whether or not you're kind of like at the right level, or if the kick is like punchy enough, or like your sub bass is too low in terms of like frequency. The sub pack and the SonarWorks, two huge things for mixing. Another thing is mixing in mono, or referencing in mono a lot. So I actually have is it called a hotkey?
A hotkey or a shortcut? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have like a shortcut set up in Ableton where I just press the N key and it goes to mono because I have a utility plugin on my master set to mono. I can just switch it on and off.
I do exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That just helps so much. Like when mixing, when making tracks, just to get an idea. You don't want to come to the end of the production or the end of the mix and master, check it in mono and go, oh, what's happened here? Like that whole problem just doesn't exist because you're just constantly checking it, probably checking it too often. So those three things for mixing and mastering. Trying to think what else. I mean, we've already spoken about Spotify and using like things like Facebook ads. That was a game changer. But the thing is, I had to learn how that works as well, because that's like a whole other industry in itself, just music marketing and promotion. So that was, yeah, a lot of time and money spent figuring out what works and what doesn't. So, and still learning now, but I definitely don't know everything.
And it's constantly evolving as well. So you need to
exactly. They're constantly changing the algorithms, both on Facebook, both on and on Spotify. So
that's interesting as well, because, and I know we did touch upon it earlier, but I have quite a lot of students asking me, how much time should I spend on production versus how much time should I spend building my social media profile? And my general advice is just focus on the music until it sounds really good, because if you're spending, 5-10 hours a week focusing on building social media, but your music doesn't sound good, when you release that track, it's like, it's a damp squib anyway. So, but that's the advice I give. So I'd be interested to see your take on that, to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. You do need to have good sounding music before social media. But at the same time, you need to start learning how to build social media. So that way, when you do have the good music, you can then promote it. And they sort of go hand in hand. I don't think you should necessarily do like 100% focus on one or the other. I think there's got to be a split. And you could build up your social media following by doing like TikToks, Reels, YouTube Shorts, by just saying like, check out what I'm working on. Should I finish this? I see a lot of those videos going on at the moment, which I think is a good way of like building up hype as well and getting some feedback and response.
And then you've got people already hyped up about that track. You've asked them whether they want you to finish it, and then when it is finished, they're already queued up knowing what the track is.
Exactly. A guy I met at the Amsterdam dance event, his music blew up on TikTok earlier in the year, and now he's teasing tracks that he's working on, and then people just commenting like, release this now, like when's it coming out? And yeah, I think we can all do that no matter what stage we're at. Yeah, that would be my tip. In fact, I'm doing those videos myself now. I'm starting to tease things that are either finished and ready for release or in progress, and just see if it is worth finishing.
My curiosity has peaked, so we'll link to your other channels below so we can check out. So you're on TikTok and Instagram, I guess.
Yeah, actually, that's another tip I have, is make sure that your music and your content is on all the platforms, because I've noticed some people don't bother with YouTube Shorts, which is effectively just TikTok and Instagram Reels. But actually, some of my stuff or some of my content has reached far more people on YouTube than on TikTok or Instagram. So the algorithms are all different, I guess. Certain things get pushed on certain platforms. But yeah, that one gets forgotten about, and I don't really understand it. I just think it should be everywhere.
Yeah, and once the content's created, and I'm just speaking of this as a content creator myself, over and above just music, for EDMtips itself, we found that, once you've spent the time and the effort making that video, why not just spend the extra 5 minutes releasing it on all the other channels?
Exactly. It's a no-brainer, but there's still a lot of people ignoring YouTube Shorts. And YouTube is huge. I think it has like 3 billion monthly active users or something. So it's actually bigger than Instagram and TikTok, technically.
Lord, that's a lot of people.
YouTube Shorts is obviously as big as that, but it has the potential to be. So like you say, extra 5 minutes, it's a no-brainer. You spend like hours creating content and fall at the last hurdle kind of thing.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Josh. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon before we say ta-ta?
No, I don't think so. Just that if anybody's listening and wants to reach out or ask me a question about something, I'm like, the best place is probably Instagram direct messages. So yeah, happy to help anybody. I'm always happy to share knowledge. It's good fun. I always say together to the top. Like I think
that's a nice saying. I like that. And prepare yourself to get a lot of direct messages.
Yeah, I might regret that. Yeah, I like to help people. So
excellent. Well, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate your time, and I know that this conversation is going to be very useful to a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah,
maybe we can do something again in the future soon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been really good having conversations, and some of the questions you've asked me have got me thinking a few things, so that's always good.
Yeah, well, it's got me thinking about a few things as well, which is what you want from a good conversation. Anyone who's watching, thanks for watching, and I'll put links to everything we've talked about today below this video, so go and check out Josh leTissier. He's got some absolute bangers, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, Josh.
Awesome. Cheers.